So as usual, we'll start off with our prayer for teacher students. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So while this is advertised as a talk, I will leave some space for some questions and answers that you might have, or at least some questions. Whether suitable answers or not, we'll have to see. But you see, if you want to achieve anything in life, it is necessary to go through a systematic series of changes that we call discipline. And if we are to engage in that, whatever the endeavor is, it begins not with engaging in some kind of disciplinary action, but an assessment. Where are we now? And a plan. What shall we do? Fortunately, within us, there are two essential drives, two desires are there. One is an inherent desire to do the best, a desire for perfection. That drive is within us. Actually, if you take it as an internal evolutionary force, we're compelled to move forward. Of course, what stops this natural movement is a gliding into a sense of childishness, where we forget this, a forgetfulness of our purpose and our direction, and that then becomes a detour for us, where we engage in pleasures. Pleasures means some kind of formulated temporary relief that is a reaction to some pressure of some kind, on the basis that inside me is a kind of hollow, a kind of gap that I need to fill from the outside. And no doubt it may have a temporary relief, but there's no permanence for it, and there's a necessity to repeat it whenever the trigger arises to bring it about. And we find that we forget our drive toward perfection, which means that we tend to go into a delaying tactic in the thrust of our purpose, our movement forward. And along with that will come an accompanying friends that try to protect our drive toward relating to this world as if it were a basket of fruit ready for us to consume, continuously supplied to us, when we actually know it's not. Because then there becomes competition, jealousy, pride, anger. Anger means I didn't get what I wanted, and therefore I react. So many, many reactions come, and they're childish because they come from our childhood. When we were 1 foot and everybody else is 6 foot, we use a formula that would have worked then, and in a more sophisticated way, we think works now. But of course, this all becomes a delaying tactic. In what we call a round of events, the technical term is samsara. The other desire is a kind of moral desire that we should do some good in the world. And with all our skills and talents variously compiled and combined, we can in fact do some good to the world. There's every reason why you have designed skills and talents that you inherently have, that in a sense nobody else has in those particular combinations. And so there's a drive to do that, and everybody has a moral sense, a kind of conscience. But that can also be distorted. That can also be thwarted. It can be thwarted by people being proud of their talents and abilities, that transmutes into a sense of power and a sense of opposition, a sense of cruelty, jealousy. All these other emotions can come, defending my small patch of ground, and ultimately can be displayed as national wars, where civilians are involved, innocent people, creating great, great suffering. And there's a forgetfulness of all of that, a lack of generosity of spirit. If we were able to take those skills and talents that we use to oppress others and against others, either domestically or nationally or globally, if we were to take all that energy and use it in order to serve a generosity of spirit, a sense of genuine and sincere charity that uplifts people rather than presses them down, then we would be world movers. And there's a great necessity for these. The whole world requires them. And there are many, many examples in history. If you go to any museum, history museum, you see many, many statues and relics from the oppressors, people of immense cruelty who made their mark in history, but they're all gone, they're all dead, and none of them felt fulfilled. And all of them employed a devious use of talents and abilities that could have been more usefully employed in construction, not destruction. And so what keeps us on track is the necessity for discipline in both these cases. In the cases of gliding into a childish aspect, what mitigates against it is the educational factor of discipline, the absolute necessity for it. Not just discipline, but rigorous discipline. We find this everywhere naturally in our social evolution as well. When children go to school, they find that there is discipline. We require boundaries. Even when a child is growing up, they will become confused if they don't have the security of boundaries. And the rigorous discipline does not mean suppressive discipline. It doesn't mean taking all our ideas and thoughts, all our impulses, and squashing them. Psychologically, that's completely impossible and will result in resistance. But Jesus said, resist ye not evil. And what is behind that is we have to learn to tune into a flow somewhere rather than swimming against a current somewhere. It's much easier to let go. If you're in water, there are two possible things that you can do: swimming or drowning. And if you want to swim, the easiest thing is not to struggle, not to flap your arms, but just to relax and let go. And there's that phrase that we have in English that we hear many times: let go and let God. Two things are happening there. When we let go, there's an influx that comes into us, because not letting go serves as an obstacle. It's sometimes a very difficult discipline for many to let go, and yet it is necessary. So there's an educative value in rigorous discipline. Schools know this, domestic environments know this, every child should know this, and self-discipline is the best of all. We can easily submit to discipline from outside and resist it, but eventually we have to find out what is the value of this rigorous discipline. And it comes in these two areas. That is the self-control that is necessary to stop this gliding into childishness, and the rigorous discipline that is necessary to collect all our skills and talents and abilities and direct them in a useful way for the good of everybody, for the good of all. And I mentioned all these oppressors that are there historically in the museums, all relics and clothing and so on and so forth belonging to them, and a full history But you see, those who had the greatest impact on history were those who managed to use their rigorous discipline as a gain, not against people, but for people. It's well known in Greek history, the Spartans were great disciplinarians, and the Stoics were great disciplinarians. Now, there's an extreme that we can have, of course. We can have a discipline to the point of punishment. So we understand that there's a great value, not just an educative value in it, but also there's a social necessity for it. And then you see in the realm of science and philosophy, there's a necessity for it as well. Scientific discipline is there. I gave a talk last night, and the old subject of what is religion and what is spirituality? What is the difference between these two things? And I pointed out that the word religion comes from the Greek, or the Latin actually, religio and religere. These are two roots, possible roots, but have different meanings. Religio means to impose boundaries, and that has a positive side, but also a negative side. The negative side is if you restrict the freedom by laws and become legalistic in your operation without thinking, an unthinking, irrational person, then this becomes restrictive of our freedom, and freedom in our Vedanta is the goal. Spirituality, on the other hand, goes a step further beyond a kind of superstructure, beyond the scaffolding necessary for a building. We transcend the scaffolding, and the scaffolding has no use anymore. And so Swami Vivekananda tells us that these secondary details, which we call religion, that are coming from religio, have to be replaced by the root of religion called religere, that is to read again. Read what again? We have to see what the clues are in scripture. We have to catch these wise people who made their mark in history and transform the world by their openness, by their infinite love, which had no boundaries, which had no criteria or restrictions. This universal love, there are many examples of, but there should be many more. And we can only get this by taking the energy that we have and canalizing it in a positive way, but it has to be structured. It has to be steady. So in science, we require this discipline. Otherwise, all kinds of theories can take their place in the field of science. Everything has to be systematic. Even experimentation has to be planned. A model has to be there. And a schedule has to be there in that same way. If our life is steered in a steady, systematic way, some people say that sounds boring. No, not at all. When you get a flow, a rhythm, this is actually called, technically in yogic language, pranayama. Pranayama, control of cosmic energy. The only way we can control cosmic energy is to make it smooth, to make it flow as it is supposed to flow, not to put any obstacles or irregularities there, to make life as smooth as possible and at the same time as productive and creative as possible. And we can only do this by discipline. The Yoga Vishishta tells us that had there been or had there not been the folly of idleness in this world, what man would fail to be either rich or learned? But yet you take a survey in the world and find out who is rich to their satisfaction and who is learned to the satisfaction of those who are knowledgeable. Then you'll see we are all wanting. And then to sort out and to do it in such a way to have a discriminating aspect, a discriminating employment that is inherently with us, a moral sense of what is good, what is not good. What do we mean by what is not good? What is not in the favor of everybody? What tends to make people weak. Strength, I gave a talk last week, strength, on the value of strength. Strength is the primary value that we have to cultivate. Swami Vivekananda, just to remind you, said, I meditate on the heart of a lion, standing up as a primary virtue, being prepared to go against the grain, thinking, I don't care what others think or what others do. I will do what is right, come what may. Not because I want to be morally superior or seem to be morally superior, but at least to employ a certain flow that yields a benefit everywhere. And so engaging in the second impulse that we have for the welfare of all beings, employing that in a useful way. In order to do this, we have to reform an area of the mind called the subconscious. And the subconscious and the conscious mind are really not two separate things. For convenience sake, we can separate them. But actually, it is simply a different vibration, if you will, of a same energy. One is pretty subtle. But the conscious mind is a reaction to what is there in front of us. And if you were to put things in percentages, probably 90% of all our thinkings, all of our mental meanderings are all in the unconscious field. So we have to employ a certain sense of resolve. We have to understand what is the principle in life, and is there a reason why we should employ discipline in spiritual life. Spiritual practice is the whole of that discipline. And actually, in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in the first section of it, first khanda, first chapter, the 12th stanza tells us about abhyasa varagya, bhyaha tani iroga. Their control. What is the control? The control of waves of the mind, divided fivefold. These waves of the mind have to be controlled. That is the whole purpose of spiritual discipline. It is all down to psychology. The mental field is in a state of disturbance. When it is easily calmed, when there's a process that does that, then we can see, have direct experience of what is sitting there within us, the infinite invisible, which is there. There's no clarity at the moment. And so discipline is not suppression. Discipline is having the skill to observe the mental field at any given moment and bring about a counter wave of positive values. Positive meaning unselfish values, values of truth and beauty, goodness, love and harmony. All these values have to come out. And so the control is abhyasa, by practice and also by non-attachment. Swami Vivekananda gives this commentary. The mind, to have non-attachment, must be clear, good, and rational. Why should we practice? In other words, why should they be disciplined? Because each action is like the pulsations quivering over the surface of the lake. The vibration dies out. And what is left? What is left is impressions. We call these samskaras. The samskaras, the impressions. What does that mean? Every action, every thought leaves its record, leaves its imprint on the unconscious mind. When a large number of these impressions is left on the mind, they coalesce and become a habit. What is our discipline? It is form a counter habit. That's the method. Not to suppress anything, not to do battle with anything. It is not the conscious mind who should fight with the unconscious mind and set up a battleground. No, it is to carefully, like a nice, kind uncle or aunt, cherish the unconscious mind and say, here, my child, I have new values I want to put in. I want to form a new habit. Is that okay? Of course, there may be resistance. You have to convince the mind. It should be okay. It's a much better thing on the basis of these two desires. The one desire for perfection and the other desire to do good for all beings. Now he goes on to say, it is said, habit is second nature. It is first nature also, and the whole nature of man, everything that we are in, is the result of habit. A repetitive way of behaving. I always say there are no bad people, only bad behaviors. So that gives us consolation, because if it's only a habit, we can make and unmake this at any time. These samskaras, these impressions, are left by these vibrations passing out of our mind, and each one of them leaving its result. Our character is the sum total of these marks, and according to some particular wave prevails, one takes that tone. I've heard some people think that samskaras are all negative. No, they are largely, in most people, of a positive kind. But you see, it is all due to repeated behavior. And we have to say, this repeated behavior goes way, way back. It starts off with single-cell organisms. And we learn survival instincts. And the collection of cells that we call a human body today is a well-organized city. In the Katha Upanishad, we are told, I repeat this all the time because it's one of my favorite passages. It gives us a real sense, a shift of our understanding of what this body is. It is an 11-gated city. And the consciousness that is within is unflickering and unborn. When we know that, that becomes a huge revolution for us and a revelation. So if good prevails, one becomes good. If wickedness, one becomes wicked. If joyfulness, one becomes happy. The only remedy for bad habits is counter habits, and this is what we call discipline. Now I'm going to transfer this term discipline to the technical term we use in Sanskrit as tapas. All the bad habits that have left their impressions are to be controlled by good habits. Go on doing good, thinking holy thoughts continuously. This is constant practice. Constant practice, no holiday for it. You do it second after second, knowing that some seconds will be uncontrolled. Never mind. That's all the habit level coming up. You put a new one in, until it becomes your second nature. In terms of your second nature, nothing changes. Horns don't grow on your head. The Holy Mother says, you do what everybody else is doing. You look like everybody else. But inwardly, everything is shining and radiant and has to shine by obligation elsewhere. You cannot hide your light on a bushel or bed. It shines for everyone to see. And it is this light that we admire in great saints. It is what is behind the artistic representation of great saints in every religion, with a kind of aura around them, particularly around the head. So, never say that any man is hopeless, he goes on to say, because he only represents a character, a bundle of habits, which can be checked by new and better ones. Character is repeated habits. And repeated habits alone can reform the character. There has to be a continuous effort, and this continuous effort really is what we call tapas. Now, in the same Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we find there is this Kriya Yoga, that is, 3 things are mentioned above all else. That is this tapas, which I have just described and mentioned. And the second one is an element of study. What does study mean? Absorbing the ideas which stimulate, which keep the motivation going, to keep the tapas going. It could be reading. And now we come to the other root, relegere, to read again. In other words, to connect again with somebody's direct experience. All scripture is somebody's direct experience at the end of the day. When we sort out the various things that are not relevant to our freedom. For example, genealogies in scriptures. Who cares who begot who and who begot who? But what is the central theme of it? The kingdom of heaven is within you. Blessed, if you read all the Beatitudes in the Christian Bible, there you have the essence, not just of Christianity, but the whole of this universal religion. Because the discovery point for everybody, whether they go through religion or not, is exactly the same. Truth is truth. Nothing can change it. It is always constant. There's nothing beyond or different from absolute truth. Absolute truth is unblemished truth. And then the final one will be offering the fruits of all your activities to that supreme principle, technically called Ishvara, but in the context of yoga it means the most ancient teacher. All our knowledge comes with boundaries, with the inference that there's a knowledge beyond it. But if you come to a supreme teacher, you can't get anything beyond that. So this is not a God in terms of a creator God, not that kind of thing. The yogic understanding of it is a little different. It's simply saying that being that is responsible for, by its knowledge, the complete rhythm of the universe, that is never deceived by the things that deceive us, namely the waves in front of us. And these waves really are seen by us as tables and chairs and people, as particles, in other words. Our modern science says, no, these are waves. And the waves are there behind the particles. And the yogis say the same thing. These are waves. And all these waves are subordinate to the supreme waves of the mind, of thought. It is thought that we have to employ. It is thought that we have to harness. And in harnessing this, we are then able to discipline ourselves. Now there's an example for that. The example comes in two areas, scriptural areas, Bhagavad Gita and the Kathopanishad, both using the symbol of a chariot. A chariot, a charioteer, horses representing the sense organs, the reins representing the mind, held by the intellect. And we have an entity there within us that by its presence is controlling everything, making your heart beat, pushing the prana in 5 directions and beyond. Same principle is making the sun shine. The universal heartbeat is also going. The pulsation that we call the universe, we can call it, in our poetic fancy, God's heartbeat, God's cosmic heartbeat, sending out waves of angels, making our crooked paths straight before us, so that all we have to do is respond in a minimal way, and God is doing the rest. What a wonderful arrangement. Divine grace opening up everything, pushing us from within, pulling us from without. So what is our part in it? Well, we have to do a little effort. And what people consider to be a little effort, other people consider to be a considerable effort. So how do we make it easy for ourselves? All right. You see, the word discipline, austerity are very difficult words to handle, because these are all conjuring up negative images, a sense of slavery, which naturally produces within us a sense of resistance. Somebody who has a certain level of determination, a certain stubbornness, if you will, strong-willed. We won't say stubborn, we say strong-willed. So somebody who's strong-willed, you say, please do this. Their inclination is to do, by their own nature, the opposite. If there is a person like that, of course, then they have to be convinced of the value of doing this. doing this discipline. And let us call it discipline. Let us not call it austerity. Let us not call it mortification of the body, because this can result in extreme positions. Let us rather call it an effort to form another habit. Now, anything that goes against our current habits will create friction. That's why this word is there, tapas, tapasya, the thing that gives us friction, literally heat, the heated brain. When you try and form new avenues within the brain, it causes friction, and friction causes heat. There has to be employed, though, a sense of fire in a sense of fiery nature, determination, resolve, dedication, an energetic movement that changes and transforms your energy into something vibrant, something that is tuned into inexhaustible energy, something that evokes courage, fortitude, ultimately strength. There's a section, chapter 17 of the Bhagavad Gita, that divides everything into threes. Because we know from our Sankhya philosophy that what we call the world, we can consider it for convenience sake separate from what is really that one entity, which we in Vedanta call Brahman, that one unity, that one without a second. The reality from that point of view is everything is pure spirit, but we are suffering from forgetfulness. Tapasya means remembrance through systematic techniques. And just as when we study anatomy or physiology, we can't see the thing as the human as one entity as we normally see it. When you say I, we think we have a totality, body-mind complex. Body, mind, personalities, quirks, hobbies, interests, and so on. All these things make up a totality called I. But this I really is made up of segments. We can easily observe these segments. Let's take the most obvious, the physical one. We have to employ the will so that the physical body behaves as we wish it to behave, now revaluing it as an earth car, now revaluing it as an instrument, so that we are not identified with the instrument. We have a mastery of the instrument and can use it. Now we bring up again this analogy of the chariot. What we call I, the physical I, is a chariot. In modern day speak a car, but it's much more symbolic to think of an ancient chariot with 10 horses, 10 senses, afferent currents, and a mind that is generally what we call generally the mind, and a section of it, a controlling aspect of it, called a determining or determinative faculty. We call this buddhi, intellect, the thing that acts as an executive officer and has a controlling capacity and a decision-making capacity and a discriminating capacity. Purifying this is what we call enlightenment. Gautama Siddhartha became Buddha because he had a purified intellect, buddhi. So with everything divided threefold in nature, namely of the nature of inertia, of the nature of egocentric activity, of the nature of purity and illumination, this is present everywhere. It's present on the psychological level, it's present on the physical level and the physics level, everywhere it's present. According to the Sankhya cosmology, the three components are nature. Just to refresh your memory of things we have covered before, in physics, this illuminating and pure element, the will to unite everything, this is called gravity. Electrical energy wants things to disperse and fly off. Get away from this unity, in other words. And that is called electrical energy. And then in the way, what's stopping everything is inertia. You must have noticed it waking up in the morning, that the first thing may well be inertia. And of course, my standard joke is, what is the maximum amount of sleep you require? Is
5 minutes more.
5 minutes more, thank you. 5 minutes more. So inertia we find there. And then we rally our awareness round, and then we get up, then we're employing some activity. Now, if we're not careful, the activity we do will be a carryover from the previous day. All our anxieties and difficulties will be carried over. It'll saturate the mind with stress and anxiety. So we have to be very careful at every point to introduce the highest qualities. Introduce the spirit of generosity, service, above all love. Unconditional love, on the basis that there's only one entity present. And so everywhere we find in the Isha Upanishad and other places, he who sees the self in all beings and all beings in the self. That's the one fundamental technique. So when we talk about forming a counter habit, that's what we're doing. We're saying, let me employ this element. Technically, we call this sattva. And sattva is so rich in meaning. It implies purity, it implies goodness, it implies truth. All of these things are being implied by this word. And so if everything comes in threes, is tapasya also in threes? Are there three levels of it? Yes, there are three kinds of it, but there are also three areas within it. Physical area is one. Then the mind is another. The mind forming concepts that comes out through the mouth as speech. Some of it we regret. Most of it, if we look at it carefully, we probably should regret. And then there is tapasya of the internal mind. The internal mind going a little deeper, that is the more subtle area, the subtle body. And in that, we find a junction between the subtle body and the causal body. And so controlling the mind, controlling the body, controlling the outlet of the mind called speech, and controlling the mind itself. These are the three areas, according to Bhagavad Gita, of this tapas. Then we have to link this with study has to take place, is also part and parcel of it. And in that will be repetition of a mantra as well, repetition of certain words that have corresponding concepts. And all words have an impact, have a potency, for good or bad, depending on the words you select. And if they are not selected at all, they just come out randomly, this is the very opposite of tapasya. This is indiscipline. You blurt something out, and then the next second you say, oh, did I really say that? And you only see that once you see the look of shock on the other person's face. Did he really say that? Then you question, did I really say that? Oh, followed by apology, followed by an effort to patch up a friendship, because people are extremely vulnerable, sensitive. They're flimsy generally in many circumstances. They're all right if you praise them. They would desire, you want praise coming into the ears. Yes, you did so well. Oh, I liked your talk the other night. Oh, so nice, thank you. Oh, that was really, we fell asleep during your talk. It was the worst talk we ever. Can we listen to somebody from New York? It's much better on YouTube. Oh, deflation. What happened to the Swami? Oh, he hung himself because you said his talk was not good. How fickle we are, see, to be inflated and deflated so quickly. And yet we see that the power of words is enormous, has an enormous impact on us. Then in daily life, what will we do with our willpower that comes out as a career, as a job, as activity, without making any discrimination between routine, boring activities? We have to make a reformation. Some activities we do. No, I don't like it. I don't like my job. I don't like the current situation I'm in. I should change it. Well, there's that possibility. But then you see, there's another possibility. And that is of finding joy in the action of it itself. That there is a source of energy that is being used that is not yours. And that the fruits of your activities, that is the results, the effects, are also not yours. You have to offer them to the real author of the activity, that cosmic energy that religion calls God. So let us see what these three varieties of discipline are and how we can adopt them systematically, one by one. Well, let us take the 14th stanza of the 17th chapter and see how that looks. Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam Shocham Arjavam Brahmacharyam Ahimsacha Shuriram Tapa Uchate. Worship of what is called technically devas. Now we have to be very careful of this term. Deva comes from a root, diva, meaning illuminating, shining, something that shines. Diwali, the thing that shines, lights, festival of lights. Unfortunately, translated by many people as gods. If you translate it as angels, that might be a better translation. These are graces, glories that come in a subtle way as waves that ultimately condense and manifest as the working, waking world that we are struggling with. How will we control this world, this physical world? We look for the elements behind that. And these elements, they come out in various combinations. And these are divine glories. By registering them, by noticing them, by thanking them, by feeling a sense of adoration, a sense of wonder, a sense of thankfulness, we really are worshiping the Supreme. And then what about those people who have found that and who do that? That is the second thing. So these are described here as the twice-born, the teachers and the wise. We might interpret that as the twice-born, meaning those in Hinduism who have the sacred thread, those castes. We can put it in the realm of castes. No, this is not the meaning of it. That is why a variety is given. What are these teachers? Any teachers? School teachers? School teachers, nurses, doctors. These people are in a category that we used to call vocational occupations. Priests all used to be called vocational occupations. But in modern times, these have become careers. Politicians should be there for the good of people. But career politicians is what we have today. And the only interest they have is self-interest. Many cases. I'm not saying all, not generalizing. That is why we find ourselves in turmoil, because without this internal discipline, power is against people because it is for your own self-interest. And if you have something for your own interest, inherently, it doesn't matter about the others. It's intrinsically selfish. So when we say this category of people and worshipping these, we are talking of these giants, we are talking of these saints, we are talking of these sages, we are talking of gurus, we're talking of teachers, we're talking of those who have discovered the previous worship. They're talking of those who have the capacity to assist in our transformation in a positive way. And that is why they are worthy of respect and even worship. And so these are the wise as well. And then the next requirement is cleanliness. What do we mean by cleanliness? I'm pretty sure we all know what it means to have a clean body. Well, on the outside at least. But then you see on the inside, there has to be something different. On the inside of the body itself, we have to make sure that our food is good. We have to make sure that our thoughts are good. We can't separate unconscious, conscious, and physical. The physical is an outpouring of your unconscious mind. It eventually comes out as not only your body, but your set of circumstances, your environment, the country in which you live in, the level of wealth, the family that you were born in, etc. All of this is contributed by the way you think ultimately, either in this life or a previous one, according to our system. So cleanliness means cleanliness in thought, because if you're stressful, the stomach will be stressed. If you're jealous, you may have kidney problems. There's somebody called Louise Hayes who relates all these physical organs to our mental frame, our emotions primarily. So we have to have a steady mind. Even at the physical level, we have to have this tapasya of mind. And then in amongst that will be making sure that the internal workings are nicely cleaned. Most of the disease that we find in humankind is because of lack of internal purifications. Cleanliness in food and everything else is to do with vibration. It is not to do with hygiene necessarily. Of course, hygiene is there. But when we say cleanliness and purity in food, for example, or in places, we're talking of, are these charged with pure vibrations? Simplicity, simple living, high thinking. That's what we want to engage in. How many complex things we have. If you now take stock of what is in your home and ask yourself, all these items which are there, did I use them in the last 6 months? If you didn't, why don't you throw them away? Why don't you remove all your clutter? Why don't you engage in simple living, simple lifestyle, simple habits? Reducing the complexity, because the complexity is associated with your association with the physical body. But all this tapasya is saying, let me take this instrument of a body and let me now deal with it and make the best use of it, so that it's a good instrument, equipped well as it is, for the higher purpose of perfection. Continence or chastity. This word is a difficult word for many. It really means purity in thought, chastity. Chastity, because you say, I can't become a monk or a nun. I can't just cut off the human race. No, that's not what this means. It means self-control, and it stands for control of all the senses, control of what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste. And all of this essentially is down as tapasya of the body, physical tapasya, but we can see how it really is control of the mind, that physical aspect of the mind. And then, of course, non-injury. Well, non-injury is a negative term, and we can relate all this to the Patanjali Yoga Sutras of Yama. You see non-injury is a prime value, but non-injury means not that I don't injure anybody physically, not that I don't do that, I don't go and punch somebody or kill somebody. No, I don't even think about it. The thought doesn't cross my mind even. Does that mean that we shouldn't defend ourselves? We should defend ourselves. We should do what is right, no doubt. There's a necessity for army and police and all the rest of it to protect us. And there's a necessity, if you're in danger, to protect yourself. But there's no animosity in it. What's the basis of it? The basis of it is seeing the self in all beings and all beings in the self. And Krishna elevates it in the 6th chapter. Seeing me in all beings, that is, seeing the personal God in all beings and all beings in that. This is the primary practice that we have to do, because the opposite side of this non-injury is love, pure love. Can we love everybody? This is a question that comes up in everybody's mind. How can we love somebody who did so much evil? There are no bad people, only bad behaviors. We try and look past the behavior and see there, Lord, you are sitting there, because you have the capacity even to misuse energy. You have the capacity to be cruel. But where does this energy come from? It comes from one source, the Supreme within you. So this is all said to be to do with Shariram Tapa Uchate. It's said to be the austerity of this external body, but there's an internal body called Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. And so we come then to what is the discipline or tapasya that is related, what we might call to speech. So, Vanmayam Tapa Uchate. This is, we say, Anudvegakaram Vakyam Satyam Priyahitam Chayat Swadhya Dhyasanam Chaiva Vanamayam Tapa Uchate. Words that cause no offense. The contrary to that is, many words cause offense. We speak without thinking. And the primary thing is non-injury. But the most injurious thing, not punching somebody, more injurious than that, is saying words which are unkind. And words don't come by themselves, they come with concepts. So this is really control of the mind. Now, what is the purpose of this tapasya? It is to strengthen our will, to make us stronger. So for Christians, for example, this time is Lent culminating now in this end of this week and so on. And it is to do with self-discipline. It is to do with an element of doing without. It is a kind of self-discipline that says, let me not entertain the senses fully. Let me control all the things I eat. Let me control all the things I think of. This is also the Muslim area of Ramadan, where you can fast, not even taking water from sunrise to sunset. But you see, many Muslims after sunset will have a feast. So what's the purpose of that? What kind of discipline is that? All the sacrifice they had for the day, it means during the day, they had their mind set on the period past sunset. We'll have a nice meal then. And maybe before sunrise, we might get a nice breakfast. So all of these things are really ritualistic things that have no meaning unless your heart is in it, unless there is some area of self-discipline. Today, many people fast for health reasons. I met a person in the Cork area who was suffering from many maladies. And he said, I went to India, we visited an Ayurvedic center for healing, and I went on a 40-day water fast. And that cured all my ailments. I was able to purify the body nicely. In the beginning, he said, I found it difficult. But halfway through, I found it much easier. By the end of it, I had no problem with it whatsoever. Of course, there are two religious things you can do, fasting and feasting. But each one has its merit also, no doubt. So every spiritual discipline will have this element of self-control. The senses, if they have their own way, are like small children. Let me pull in this direction, let me pull in that direction. We can say, no, calm down, my children. Let us simply go into this physical element of simplicity. But then also, let us make sure that our words do not cause offense. Let us be careful when we weigh up our words, not suppressing or repressing, Oh, I felt like saying this, but I restrained myself. This is not tapasya. Restraining even the thought before it comes out. And when it comes out, and there's nothing we can do about it, bear in mind that reactions will come. These are not your direct enemies. These are your opportunities to replace them with something better. It's the art of continuously doing this, tuning the mind in, or the attention to the glory of the Supreme, is spiritual practice. Continuously doing it. If we continuously do it, it means that it is not always there. We have to take the deviations and the normal kinds of, so-called normal kinds of behaviors, the immediate reactions, and without a sense of guilt or shame, with a sporting attitude, with an adventurous attitude, with a sense of gameship and a sense of delight. You say, you fellows, all right, let's put something better in. Come on. Play the game well. Now, how we avoid this words that cause offense is because the words have to be truthful. We may say, you are a liar. You see, there's a catchphrase, you see. Somebody says, I am a liar. That means that maybe they're truthful. Because maybe what they just said is a lie. It's what we call circularity of argument.
It's almost never negative.
Yes. So, so we can't say that, you see. But if you say that, you see, what is the truth about it? Well, the truth is, I am not a liar. I don't have the aberration I'm accusing you of. And most of us do. It is, in a sense, hypocrisy. So what is truthfulness? We have to be truthful without injuring the other person. And the ultimate truthfulness is a penetrating vision that goes to the heart of a person. There we find God. Nothing more, nothing less, in fullness, perfect, free, without any blemishes, without any defects. There it is. But also words that are pleasant and uplift another person. If we have words to spare, why don't we use them to bring a person up or to commiserate in a sense of compassion with the other person's suffering? Why don't we do it as a contribution toward the other, rather than bringing somebody down or exerting our own sense of egoism? Because most of our words are expressions of our egos, our self-image, putting ourselves first. And egoism is the great, great enemy. So behaving in a natural, truthful, honest, pure, non-egoistic way, we're able to say, let me now nourish this second desire that I have for the welfare of all beings. And let me raise a person up. To do that, I myself must be raised up. And also regular recitation of scriptures, because what is the basis for that behavior is the principles and practices contained in what we call scripture. What is scripture? Scripture is the evidence of somebody who has seen the truth and has a formula for you to practice, A, B, C, D, has a model for you to follow, has a formula that suits you. Not all scriptures are the same, but different will emphasize different things. You take what suits you. Something that is useful to you, that elevates your own mind, you take that. And inherent in that is not only have I seen God, but you also can see him, and here's the way. So when scripture talks about do this, don't do that, it's not addressed to God. It's addressed to us with this understanding that for a few moments at least, we can redirect our attention to something higher, something better, something more beautiful, something more profound, something deeper, something more blissful, something more joyful. These are said to be austerities of speech. And then finally, we have what is austerity of mind, So we put it like this: Manaha prasadaha samyatvam maunam. Maunam means silence. Atmanvin graha bhava samasudhir ityatat tapo manasam uchate. Serenity of mind, gentleness, silence, self-control, purity of heart. These are said to be mental austerity. This is what we should practice first, not last. Let us go through it. How can we get serenity of mind? How can we practice that? We have to change our outlook. We have to see the peaceful substructure in everything before it erupts into waves. That causal element, this is the causal mind, the causal element before other things erupted from it. We have to make sure that we don't care what happens, whether it's positive, negative, good, bad, pain, pleasure, hot, cold, praise, blame. All these pairs of opposites we should be immune to by shifting our attention toward the principles of the Vedanta philosophy, namely knowing your own steady nature and becoming then the example of it, what we call sthita prajna, somebody of steady wisdom, somebody who has transcended the gunas, gunatita. These two phrases are being used. Gentleness, inwardly gentle, compassion is involved in our gentleness. And silence above all else, a quiet mind, because you cannot meditate with noise. You can only meditate in complete silence and mental solitude. Even if you are with others, you go to that poised area of solitude, which is pure silence. And mona, the practice of mona, of course, is a practice that can be done on certain days, if you will. I know, for example, when Mahatma Gandhi was invited to a great conference to do with Indian freedom, and of course he wasn't going to go in for bargaining. It was freedom or nothing. And so he sat at the conference table, and all the delegates had to be told, you see, the Mahatma is practicing mona today, silence. He can't tell you anything. It was a magnificent failure. So look at that. So this practice of mona, I remember in Zimbabwe, on Sundays, we had an ashram in the second capital called Bulawayo. And there was somebody, he had a shoe shop, a very, very holy, saintly man. And in the evenings, he would drive out to the ashram about 20 kilometers from the city center. And this was right by the Mguza River. Beautiful, beautiful scene. Probably one of the most beautiful ashrams I've ever visited. It used to be a motel, and we converted it into an ashram. And there we constructed steps down to the river. And he used to sit watching the sunset, playing one-stringed instrument, something like a tanpura. And then, with one string, and singing away, a Gujarati man. And then he'd spend the night there and go off in the early morning, having risen in the morning and done his religious devotion. Sunday in the evening, same thing in the morning, and going back to his business. A real yogi. Every Sunday, even though he would interact with people in his presence to walk around, serve tea and all the rest of it, but everybody knew that from sunrise to sunset, he practiced silence, mona. Now, how to deal with people? I have a formula. Agree where you can and keep silent where you can't. Self-control and purity of heart. That is all your emotions, all your feelings. They have to be, they're energies, and they have to be steered toward love of God. And really, we haven't got time this week to go into it. Maybe we'll continue the subject next week. Because in texts such as the Bhagavatam, the particular 11th chapter selected, the conversation of Uddhava and Krishna. And there, a beautiful method of discipline is necessary. I'm going to summarize the principle of it. I was in a conversation with a devotee in a certain place. He said, my guru has passed away, and he told me repeatedly I should intensify my tapasya, but I don't think I can. It's too hard for me. It seems like mortification or austerity. It seems like military discipline. I cannot handle it. I'm doing the best I can. And then I said to him, are you not a devotee? He said, yes, but he didn't understand my question. I said, do you not have a chosen ideal? Do you not have the path of bhakti available to you? Oh, yes, yes. You see, in bhakti yoga, there is no tapasya like this. It is all love, because love of God means all the other elements are saturated, are outweighed. And the example is like this that I also use, that if you want to conquer your shadow, all your mental aberrations in the conscious mind, don't try and stab your shadow or ambush it. Walk toward the sun and the shadow will obediently follow. That's all you have to do. In that same way, the more we walk toward this embodiment of love, this model of supreme perfection that we call a personal God, the more we allow our worldliness to diminish. Our concern with all these other things of people and places and events, that goes away because we see things in a new light, because everything is bathed in that supreme. There is I see I've exceeded the time a little bit, so I'll just conclude and finish off. But just to then bring up the thought that was issued today, and that tells you the story of what I've just mentioned now. Seekers ask, Lord, where art thou? But he replies, you see me not? My voice is heard in whispering leaves. My face shines forth on rippling waves. My breath is felt upon your skin. My joy is sent through warbling birds. I blink as every heavenly star that guards and makes your destiny. Look up and see my skin of space. Look down and feel my lap of earth. I am soft grass grown at your feet. Your body warmth is my heartbeat. So look for me where'er you be. My child, your guiding light is me. And we'll finish off with that. Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.